Hi, welcome to Cafe 229. Today, we're very happy and honored to have Dr. Lisa Miller. Dr. Lisa Miller is a professor of psychology and the founder of the Spirituality Mind-Body Institute at Columbia University. Hi, Dr. Miller.
Hi, I'm so delighted to be here, and please call me Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. We're so happy to have you because I think our show is focusing on spirituality, and you are like an expert in this field. Especially your recent books, like The Awakened Brain, is such a wonderful topic. Because I think like many Zen masters used to say that we all have the innate ability to be awakened. So can you say a little bit about what spirituality is to start with, since not all our audience may know what that means?
Sure. So as scientists, we don't define spirituality all told, as a theologian might.
Okay.
But we do have an outstanding range of tools, if you will, the scientific lens, whether it's an MRI study, a genotyping study, a long-term clinical course study. We have a lens through which to identify threads of lived human spiritual life and the implications of those threads of lived human spiritual life on the rest of our lives, as well as the origins of those threads. And as we look across now over 20 years of peer review, published science, and again, across many different paradigms, across MRI studies, genotyping studies, twin studies, it appears that there are two threads of lived human spirituality, which are innate. And that is contrasted to the gift of a religion, which is 100% environmentally transmitted. Religion is the gift of parents or grandparents, our community.
Sure.
Religion may be practices or language or symbols through which to embrace and cultivate our natural spirituality. But every one of us, we know through twin studies, is born a naturally spiritual being. And so when people come up to me and say, am I spiritual? Yes, of course, from day one, we are all naturally spiritual beings. It is 1/3 innate, 2/3 cultivated. So not only is this our birthright, but spirituality needs to be engaged and cultivated to fully come to fruition. Otherwise, if you will, the spiritual core can atrophy. And in particular, two threads of lived human spiritual life that are innate are a capacity for transcendent awareness, and the ability to feel the presence of that transcendent relationship in our love for one another and all living beings.
So spirituality, from what you talk about, there are two key components. One is this transcending awareness, and one is the ability to share that, I guess, the awareness with others. So when you say transcending awareness, I guess I was thinking more like, am I getting it correctly? The transcending awareness, that's something that helps us to feel transcended.
We are able to perceive and see. Built into life itself is a great force, a great presence. My word is God. People have different words. Some people call it force or the universe or Hashem, Allah, what Jesus, whatever one's word might be. There is built into life itself a very life-giving force through which we are loved and held, and we are guided. And this is something that is all but silenced in the public square until we suffer so badly, for instance, with addiction or trauma, that finally people feel welcomed to express, I've got to hand it over. I've got to turn to power. But we wait until people's lives fall apart to say, okay, you can say it now. I've got to hand it over. But really from day one, we are built to be in a transcendent relationship, to hand it over, to be, if you will, an open system. The opposite of being a spiritual person is not atheism. The opposite of being a spiritual person, in which we are an open system, is to be a closed system, which is to say radical, I call it Mighty Mouse, anthropocentrism, that the human is all powerful, the human's in total control. It's like air traffic control. We're going to land that plane. We're going to tell it when to take off. Well, that's a very narrow view of the range of our experience, the range of our capacity. To be in total control maybe applies, 3-5% of the time.
Sure.
Most of life is dynamic and flux. And if we learn how to open our awareness to be in a relationship with the force, the consciousness, the spirit in life, then we're an open system living in dialogue, in tandem, in unity with life. It's an entirely different stance. We need to be able to talk back and forth, but this stance of being an open system, awakened to the sacred presence, consciousness in us, through us, and around us, that is a way of being that is so much more creative and innovative, so much more buoyant in difficult times. So much more, yes, at work, far more successful, but in life, much more related to the actual forces that are going on around us. So in the Army, I've worked a lot with the Pentagon. It's called situational awareness. And when we are situationally aware, we're ready to go, no matter what comes.
So it's sort of like, I guess I often think of like, how each of us are like a piece of an iPhone. And but in order for iPhone to be really meaningful, you really need to be connected to the cloud. So we're really not the iPhone, but we're more like connected to something bigger. So being spiritual is to sort of be smaller and realize something out there that we're interconnected in some way.
Well, when you call me on the iPhone, there is information, right? And it's in two places at once. You might call it superposition. Right. And this generation, this beautiful awakening generation of Gen Z, is really only a quarter inch away from awakening, because it is an implicit understanding of reality that information can be pulled from the air, from the field. I don't need to tell you something. You don't need to hear it through your five senses to know it. There can be direct awareness. And as we awaken, we realize that intuition, mystical experience, direct knowing, all of these forms of human perception, they're not beliefs, they're perception, downloads, are things that are part of being an open system. When we awaken our natural spirituality, we are able to perceive and receive, so that we don't merely empty the mind as a way of getting there. We grow still so that we might cross the threshold into an awakened awareness, which is to receive, to catch it in the catcher's mitt, something that I didn't know before.
Awesome. So you say we all, I guess, innately have this ability. That's the key part. Now, that's the interesting part too now, because I think in your lab, you were able to demonstrate through like scientific evidence.
We did. Right, Peter, exactly. So knowing that through twin studies, every one of us is born with an innate capacity for awakened awareness, compared to the usual, achieve. Got to get it. How am I going to do it? It's radical control.
Right.
Well, awakened awareness is the much needed complement. And it's to be implemented, I would say, over 3/4 of the time, through which we can say, what is life showing me now? What is force or spirit putting in front of me now? Hey, of all people in the world, there's a homeless gentleman next to me now. Maybe tap, this one's yours. Could you be helpful to him? Right? And in this sense, we are all players on a divine stage, if you will, or to use another metaphor, we're emanations raised from one sun. We are what is really the second innate capacity of spirituality, the ability to see ultimate reality in our relationship to one another.
So this innate ability, I guess, is our spiritual muscle somewhere within us, need us to build on.
We invited people of all faith traditions, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Catholic, Christian, Sikh, Jain, and people who say I'm spiritual, but not religious. All come. Welcome to our MRI. Come on in and tell us 2 stories. Tell us about a time when you were really stressed. And tell us about a time where you felt a deep connection to the force in life, your higher power, God, whatever your word may be. So the first story, no matter where someone was from or what tradition they were part of, or whether they were spiritual or not religious, the story of stress was not what we had expected. So when we asked 18 through 25-year-olds, this is a Gen Z story, tell us about a time you were stressed, none of the stories sounded like the time I pushed for the triathlon or scaled Kilimanjaro or struggled to learn organic chemistry or Mandarin. Nothing had to do with challenge. The stress stories sounded like this. I have got to get a job at that law firm. I have got to get an interview for that bank. I have got to get her or him to say yes. I've got to get to that school. Gotta. And as the I've got to have it narrative ran, what we saw through the fMRI, right, the movie camera MRI tracking circuits, blood flow, was the insulin striatum, effectively the addicted brain. I've got to have it quietly inculcated through our culture. It is in the air and water of the public square, the boardroom, the schoolroom. Narrow achieving awareness. I've got to have it, and what tactically are the steps to get there, or how we're schooled. It's the implicit curriculum, and yet it is a setup because it has run the addiction networks over and over and over again to the point where our life becomes one in which we are prepared to be addicted.
Wow.
The second we get that.
Wow.
But we can take that same young person, same 18 through 24-year-old, and say, hey, let's put our hand on the gear shift. Let's change your conversation with life. The one that most of them have had, although it is not commonly supported or discussed or strengthened through a university or even the public square. Most 18 to 25-year-olds, Gen Z, have had the second other conversation. And it goes like this. I'm walking down the sidewalk. I'm feeling so angry, such a loser. I've just been turned down at 5 out of 6 medical schools. I'm never going to be a doctor like my mother or father. I'm such an idiot. And then I see light in the leaves. And I know that life has a plan for me, and I will be a healer in the way I am intended.
Wow.
Or, we went out for 3 years. I had a promise ring. We were going to get married. And the week of graduation, he called it off. I felt so unattractive. I felt so unworthy. I felt like such a loser. But then I went home, and sitting in the pews of my childhood house of worship by my parents and grandparents, I felt their love for me as their granddaughter. And then I felt God's love, if that's that person's word. And I realized their love, God's love, I will love again. I will love again. There is a profound reshuffling of meaning when we use our awakened brain. When we use our awakened brain, there's a catch in the catcher's mitt. It's a high pixel perception. And we just know in our deep inner wisdom that this profound reshuffling of meaning holds more truth. Now, the thing I want so much, that I've got to have it story in narrow achieving awareness, that's only based on the information from today going back historically in my life. I've seen people who got that thing and I want to be like them, or I've always wanted that thing. The I've got to have it story is historically based. But the high pixel catch of intuition, of the profound resonance of a rearrangement of meaning in an awakened state, that holds information that has yet to be fully unfurled and will unfold over time. That is a complementary form of knowing that is our birthright and tremendously understrengthened in education, and all but silenced in the boardroom or the public square. But if we invite each other, if we say, okay, this second now, we embrace the wholeness of human knowing. And in fact, I don't want 1/3 of an employee. I want her or his best knowing. I want the whole employee at my table. I'm interested in your awakened catch. I'm interested in your awakened awareness. Because what happens is people save their best knowing for home. And I'll give you an example. There was a woman I knew who had 2 beautiful girls, and her spouse wanted so much to have a 3rd child, and it wasn't taking. And 6 months went, a year went, 2 years went by. And finally, they were beyond elated. They told me this news, they had conceived. But when she went for her follow-up, this woman with the new pregnancy ran tests and received back, based on her blood work, numbers that suggested that the child might be profoundly compromised in a way that would make his life very difficult. They also knew it was a boy. So this woman came to me and she said, something in me knows this child is okay. And it's not just that I hope the child's okay or I wish the child's okay. It took 2 years to conceive this little boy. Something knows. And it was her choice to not take the first round of tests at their face value. She really wanted to know the risk to this boy inside her body. And so she went to the national expert who looks at prenatal wellness of the fetus. And the same thing happened. The numbers were run. The numbers looked very similar. The woman walks in. She sits down next to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Tell me what you think. Tell me how you're feeling." The pregnant woman said, "I just know that this child is okay. I don't know how I know it. It's just directly I know." And the doctor went over the numbers with her and said, "Okay, I've read this to you," and set the numbers aside, visibly pushed them to the side of her desk. And the national expert on prenatal health said, "I want you to know that it's been my personal experience that when a mother comes in and says, 'I just know this child's okay,' no matter what the numbers show, the child has been okay."
Wow.
But when a woman comes in and she says, "I just know this child isn't well," no matter what the numbers say, the child isn't well. Okay, that was an ultimate decision. This couple waited 2 years. They finally conceived a little boy.
Yeah.
They had 2 sisters at home. And the husband, very moving story, the husband turns to the wife and says, "You seem to have a deep form of direct knowing. I'm going to give this to you." He acknowledged in this moment that you have a certain knowing deep within your inner wisdom. And whether you call that an intuitive understanding, a gut instinct, a mystical perception, they trusted her deep knowing, her awakened perception, and the child was fine.
Wow, this is very powerful story. And the story you share with us is like such a big contrast between I need, I want, I must have, versus the calling out our wisdom, calling out purpose and meaning is such a profound differences. And then you not only it's a profound story in terms of their differences, but the brain imaging is also very different according to you. That is
yes. So when we move the I've got to have it story, which is really, the silent curriculum of child in the air and water, the silent curriculum of elementary school, high school, college, is actually a deep induction into I've got to have it, narrow circuitry of addictive achievement. And we ask that young adult, tell us the other story. It shifts, right? And when it shifts, and we hear the deep awakening, the deep unexpected awakening, what goes off in the brain are entirely different circuits. First of all, quieting of the mind, and that one of the 4 pieces is shared in common with the beautiful work of mindfulness, getting present, rooted. Right? Disengagement of the default mode network. And then, having gotten present, the person can cross over the threshold into awakened awareness, through which 3 things are seen in the fMRI. First, we know, we feel deeply that we are loved and held. We feel deeply loved and held by God, by spirit, by life itself, by nature. Loved and held, that deep feeling that you hear in AA, handing it over to the higher power in moments of trauma. I've got to turn to someone bigger than myself. We are loved and held. The bonding network comes up online. Then we shift from the narrow top-down dorsal, I've got to have it, to the bottom-up ventral attention network. I've got to have it. Whoa. Suddenly life just became a lot more full of light and color and motion. Life is powered back on. And many people say a whole new opportunity pops, whether it's meeting someone new, whether it's turning right instead of left. Red door, red door, red door. Suddenly a yellow door opens. Quite significantly. And that shift from the dorsal to the ventral attention network is accompanied by something popping, guidance. We are loved and held. We are guided. And finally, the parietal that puts in and out hard boundaries. It's the most consistently found finding in all of the world on the neural correlates of spiritual awareness. That you sit there and I sit here, that we each have our zipped up bio bodysuit and our own name. We are points and we are part of one wave, white caps on one ocean. Interbeing, right? We are distinct and one. Well, the parietal pulse says no, that we each have our own journey and we are part of one field of life, one human story. We are never loved, held, guided, and never alone is the neuro docking station of our awakened brain. And every one of us is built and born to be able to perceive
Yeah.
that we hand it over to the higher power, that we're in a sustained, transcendent relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us tell it as a dialogue. I talk to God and I feel an answer in my heart. Some of us tell it in the third person, that the great presence of spirit is in and through sun and air and crow.
Sure.
Many of our rich Indian traditions, the third person. And many of our rich Eastern traditions tell it in the first person. I am one.
Mm-hmm.
We are one. We are all being. Existence is one. Well, whether that sort of wraparound of we're one, we're in dialogue, or spirit is in and through all creation, the deep neurodocking station is the same.
How
The
interesting.
capacity to transcendent relationship.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Wow. How
So,
interesting.
okay, first, yes. And so if we open our spiritual awareness through one tradition, we are more prepared to feel it in all places and spaces.
Mm.
That is, and I don't worry about what tradition or within or without of which tradition my children,
Mm-hmm.
are they going to be Jewish? No, I care that they have strengthened their awakened awareness through which they are open to the guidance of all life, through which they do know that they're loved and held and never alone. That's what I care about for my children. And that is what should be in the air and water of our parenting, schooling, culture, and yes, boardrooms, if we want a whole employee instead of like the leftover third.
So we should start really early with our young generation, not wait till we're like 30s and 40 when we hit midlife crisis, when we need to get that Porsche. Then we're like, oh, is it what life is all about? But we should really start early to train that spiritual muscle, to discover our spiritual ability, right?
Yes. In fact, I think it is the most important thing we can do for children, teenagers, and in college. We just held Awakened Campus Global, in which university leaders from all over the world convened and said, what really is our obligation as a university is to support the deepest bearings in every college student, every emerging adult, the coming forward of natural awakened awareness. College and high school is a time in which there's an accelerated awakening, hardwired. We know this through longitudinal twin studies that, in college, shortly thereafter, there's a hunger to know what really matters in life. What is meaningful? What is a purposeful life so that I can go live one? Right? This is baked into us. So when a child is 5, I can promise you that at 22, they will be on a deep spiritual quest. There's a surge of not just meaning and purpose, because those are watered down terms. Ultimate meaning, ultimate purpose in relationship to the deep fiber of life itself. Right. So I don't mean purpose like I'm going to be a lawyer or a doctor, or I want to be nice to people. Sure. I mean, in my understanding of the deepest nature of life, the source, the sun from which we are emanations, for what purpose are we here at all, existentially, and towards what end? And many people say, well, my purpose is to love, or my purpose is to serve God as I hear his or her presence in my life. Or that's a purpose. That's an open system.
Sure. I agree very much so with what you said, because my college campus, we're a Catholic college and we focus very much on spirituality. And I myself have a minor in mindfulness and contemplative practice. So hoping that our student can cultivate that spirituality a bit more.
I mean, to your point, often faith-based colleges are further along. There are certain core understandings in the air and water of the culture, such as 2 dimensions of innate awakened awareness, to be present to transcendent relationship and feel the great presence in our love for one another. I would imagine that if we looked at high schools of all different traditions, Catholic, Sufi, Jewish, and whenever you hit a faith-based educational setting, the deep spiritual life that we are all given, our birthright, is strengthened. There is a practice of receptive transcendence, prayer, meditation, through which we ask a question of God, or we turn to our higher power and are shown a direction.
Right.
Feel a deep unity with one another. That's not just social support. All types of social support are not the same. There is a form of spiritual social support where you are God's child. You are a soul on earth. You are my brother, which means that if I, today see that you're doing much better than me, well, I can have some sense of joy and collaboration rather than just narrow competition. Or if you you take my girlfriend or boyfriend, I might be angry, but I don't completely end our relationship. There's much more connecting us when we know each other's part, when our own love for one another is strengthened through understanding that we're all emanations, we're all divine beings from one source.
It's almost like each of us are like a Lego. You know how like a Lego have a Lego person? Each of us are like a little Lego person, but we're all really part of the Lego.
Yes. Yes. And, the Lego structure didn't get built randomly. That is one of the most bizarre things that I was taught in school, I will say. I was taught that the world is random. That is an extraordinary claim. And I've not seen one shred of scientific evidence to support that the unfolding of events in the world is random. That was quite. The only thing I was taught worse than that was that when I was a child in about fourth grade, there was a pyramid of the family of life. And at the very bottom were animals that were smaller and had fewer cells. And somewhere in the middle were our aquatic sisters and brothers. And then came, dogs and cats, and then monkeys. And then at the very top of the pyramid, can't believe it, it's horrifying. At the very top of the pyramid were humans. Imagine that humans made a pyramid and put themselves at the top, and the reason was, I'm not kidding. I was fourth grade. I was taught the reason for this so-called pyramid where humans are supposedly at the top was because humans had an opposable thumb. So, if it was just amazing. I mean, I don't know any other species that thinks that others don't understand things. And in fact, when I walk in nature, everybody else, whether it's birds or deer, everybody else is in relationship with one another. No one else assumes. I've never met another species that assumes that nobody else gets it. I mean, what a blinding assumption.
Now, just be curious, since we all have that innate spiritual core in some way, is it possible, does it always express itself in a constructive manner, or do you feel like you have to be in the right environment to allow it to flourish?
When we use our natural awakened brain, it only perceives that which is loving, holding, guiding, and never leaves us alone. It only perceives a higher power, a force through life, the universe, God, Jesus, what your word is, that is loving, holding, guiding. So there's no such thing through this lens of science and through the science of the awakened brain. There's only good that is engaged through the awakened brain. It is not a neuroseat of nihilism or duplicity or hypocrisy. It is a deep seat of transcendent perception.
Right.
Now, the opposite of transcendent perception is not atheism. It is radical solipsism, anthropocentrism, that I call Mighty Mouse. It's the view that things only happen when humans make them happen, and that somehow it didn't go the way I wanted. I made a mistake. That's where we ruminate right off the charts. What did I say? Did I say it the wrong way? If I'd shown up yesterday instead of today, what if I had, more money or less time? Or, those are questions that are radically distorted by the deep assumption that we have 90% control instead of 3% control.
Right.
We have to prepare. I'm a scientist and we plan for a study. We prepare tactically, strategically, we research. But what we find, we can't predict. And the best studies are not where you find what you wanted. You find something better than what you wanted. And that's true in life. Can we do a practice?
Sure.
Good. So this is about using our awakened awareness.
Okay, cool. I guess our audience can all do that.
Great. I'm going to invite you to clear out your inner space. Take 5 breaths. I invite you to set before you a table. This is your table. And to your table, you may invite anyone, living or deceased, who truly has your best interest in mind. Anyone living or deceased who truly has your best interest in mind. And with them all sitting there, ask them if they love you. And now you may invite your higher self, the part of you that is so much more than anything that you've done or not done, what you might have or not have, your true eternal higher self, and ask you if you love you. And now finally, you may invite your higher power. Whatever your word is, however you know your higher power. And ask them if they love you. And now with all of those people sitting there right now, what do they need to tell you now? What do they need to share? What do you need to know now? Right now. When you're ready, I invite you back.
That's a very wonderful, wonderful exercise. I think all our audience can benefit from that. I think the feeling I got was really a sense of warmth and presence. It's like it kind of opened up your mind, but yet that space is full of warmth. So it's quite a wonderful practice that you just shared with us.
Our awakened brain, every one of us has it. This is our birthright. And there's nothing that can happen to us, nothing anyone can say or do that will ever take this away from each and every one of us. So my ultimate hope is, I want you to have a great life. You already are. I want everyone of us here, everyone to have a great life. I love them. Yeah. And that means going from being a closed system to an open system. Perhaps they already have. But the more that we realize that we are an open system, that an awakened brain catches guidance, that awakened brain doesn't make our path, but discovers our journey. It's not my hope for my kids that they're going to get all the things they think they want.
Right.
It's my hope that they're going to discover worlds that they've yet to even imagine. So go from being a maker of our path to a discoverer, like an adventure. Sometimes it hurts. I'm not saying it's always easy, but it's big life. It's an inspired life, open system, awakened.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. This is such a wonderful sharing that you have with us. I think I gained a lot just by your knowledge and wisdom, and I hope our audience can do as well. Any final words you want our audience to remember from you before we wrap it up?
When you feel that little whisper of a hunch, that is the most important information of the day. When you feel you're standing in line at the Starbucks or the grocery store and you don't know why, but somehow you've just got to turn to the woman in front of you and say this thing. You don't know where it came from or why. Say it. Because that came from source. That came from the sun.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
And we were to be trail angels for one another.
Awesome. So such a wonderful final words from you. Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. And I hope our audience can really enjoy our conversation with Dr. Miller, where she shares such a wonderful wisdom and wise words with us every month, third Friday. Stay tuned.